Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave.
And Mackie, who is now unmuted. Hurrah!
On WZZR, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on www.revolution.radio, where it's more than just radio. So jump into the chat room if you can. This is show number, I think my thing just fell over. Goodness me. Oh, my machine is having such a hard time right now.
It's got the measles. It's got the measles.
Did you know?
Measles.
Just why you say measles? Did you know? And I'll interrupt the entire intro for it. They're saying if you are old enough to have had the first round of measles shots when you were a kid, that you need another one.
Well, I had the measles, so there you go.
Yeah, good for you.
Good for me, I say, right? Well,
that's what I say.
Apparently, it was pretty bad. Sorry for interrupting the intro, but I spoke to my mom about it because I remember I was sick. I don't remember what she said. I was sick. I was sick, and I don't remember. So you should have it when you're a child before the age of 10, if you can, or get immunized or whatever. Anyway, on you go with the intro.
Thank you. I think it's 373. I think today's show is.
For me.
That's what I believe.
370 and 300. 100.
Nice reverb. It's on air, online, and on your smart device. So grab an app to listen from anywhere or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. I've always liked, I've kept that in, and I always have liked just how nice that is to say. If you missed Solaris's show, which I hope you didn't, and I think something's gone wrong once again with my recording software. It just, as soon as I hit local record, it starts not having a good time. And then
it's a feature. It's an
undocumented feature.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can do that if you like. Oh, okay. It's going to do it again. I know this. I'll move on. Solaris' show was awesome. No, I can't get my mouse. My mouse will not move as long as nothing else is broken. I'm just going to keep rolling. Solaris always has great guests. And if you don't know who Solaris is, but you listen to our show, you need to catch her shows. Always has great guests, great info, and it's certainly, you're missing out once you know what her content is. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, completely right.
100%. No, it's true. It's true. You don't know what you're missing unless you experience it. And Solaris herself is a fascinating person, not just a great interviewer, but her story is very compelling. So I concur with Dave.
Okay, so she had Willie Miranda on, and they were talking about spirits, and that was awesome.
Oh, spirits, love it.
And then in hour 2, she was on her own. Solaris was doing it on her own. That's very rare, to be honest. But it a great show as usual. So I'll hang that part up right there. My recording software is not doing anything. It's not recording anything, so I'll have to get a copy from the station. All right. It only cost $5.95 Australian. Soon that's going to be like $7.80 Australian, because we're now, I think we're floating around around 70 cents buy price. This is $5.95 Australian to connect to the archives. I subscribe to the archives so I can grab any host show that I want, and I'm not always able to listen to all of Solaris' shows, so I downloaded a file and I listen to it at my own time. And that's what this whole thing is all about. That's the new thing. You listen to what you want when you want it. Remember, TiVos came out, right? And you could record anything. You just sit down and start watching it. Flick through the commercials. It's all good. Now, everything does this. And it's all you. It's your time, as expensive as that is. You get to listen to the things you want, only the things you want, when you've got the opportunity to do it. So Anyway, I suggest you subscribe to the archives. Meki and I, because we live in Australia, and I suggest that you do a similar thing and find out who the native people were that lived in your area, clearly before they were pushed out by our civilization. There are remnants of the mob, it's called here. That's not a tribe, it's a mob. It's a group of people that were living where I live. And where I live, it was and still is, to the very minimalist percentage, the Darkinjung people. And where Meki lives, it's the
Darak people. The Darak people.
Now, I noticed, Meki, around your streets, there's references to it.
Oh, yeah. So I live not just my street. I live in a relatively new suburb in Western Sydney. It used to be a gravel pit, a boral gravel pit. It's called Pemulwuy. The suburb is called Pemulwuy. And Pemulwuy was actually an Aboriginal who was fighting the British back in the day, some 200 years ago. In fact, he killed the gameskeeper of the governor. I want to say it's Governor Phillips' gameskeeper, but I could be wrong. And he was executed for his troubles, and his wife as well, if I'm not mistaken. But he's a very famous warrior, and now they've named a suburb after him. Not only that, a whole bunch of street names around our neighborhood bear Aboriginal names. So 200 years onwards, I guess it's a different story, right? It's interesting how things, I don't want to say get whitewashed, but certainly people's attitudes change, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. I'm not being facetious. I think it's a good thing.
You know, a lot of main roads were built on the existing Aboriginal highways. They're routes between major towns. Some of the names that were given went to where I lived in Carlingford. When I grew up, there was a street called Ilarangi, which is like view of many trees. It was able to see the Bowral from Carlingford, from the Hills district. Becky, it was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
There's very seldom Aboriginal names used anywhere, and when you see them, they stand out. And it's the greatest respect. That if this is the only legacy, it makes me sad. But and I think that we're really in a need for being barefoot and being part of the culture that our land still represents today, despite all the stuff we've built on it. So Meki and I pay our respects to elders past, present, and future, and also just remember the lands that we live on had custodians. Those custodians of the land looked after those lands and told stories and passed them down from generation to generation about 240,000 times between generations. And that's being really generous. Meki, I've been watching some out of Australia documentaries and so evidence that has come out from the DNA that says Native Australians might have been the original folk. And there's been a lot of sand through the hourglass since that was the case.
Well, look, yeah, and you have to look at the totality of the evidence. We are now invested, I want to say, in the out of Africa theory with the Leakeys and Lucy and all that. I personally, I think the whole construct is very shaky, and I think, in fact, that the Aborigines are probably the oldest surviving genetic members of our species. But I don't think they're the oldest ever. So I think that the human race, or even precursors of the human race, are far older than. But we'll talk. Actually, we might even get to some of that evidence today, potentially. The Smithsonian cover-ups and that. We might. We are on page 28 of 75. So probably not. Because the tinfoil head's on us too at the end. But sorry, go on.
Do you have version 3? Is that the one you're currently working with?
That's the one. Giants under the earth is where we.
That's exactly where we are. All right. Did you have any news? Because I've got a couple of items today.
Oh, I got buckets, but you go first.
All right. Well, mate, if we double up, that'd be great, right?
Yep, 100%.
So the first one is just coming back to NK, and that was our abbreviation for North Korea. I want the thing that deciphers my voice and makes text out of it to have a hard time with NK. So, look, they tested another missile this week, and it was shortly after returning from a meeting with Russia. And because remember that last time they met with Trump, and it was like, yeah, we're gonna basically go underground with all of our nuclear stuff, and we'll stop testing rockets. That's what we'll stop that. But they did a little short range one, and I started wondering to myself, what was the conversation they had with Russia? Is this like I don't know, like a proxy Cold War? Is that what it is? Because, maybe Russia's back in the game again, because this is in my worst accent. And I'm thinking, does this mean that they received advice from Russia saying something like, test your missiles with impunity? What is what West can do? Sorry, that was pretty bad.
That's a Vladivostokian accent, isn't it? It's not Moskovian or St. Petersburgian. No, it's from Vladivostok.
What is West? The West going to?
I
don't know. Look, to me, I had to have a little chuckle on myself because I thought, not my poor accent, but the wording of what I've made here. I think maybe that was something that happened, because it's just, it's a correlation. They met with them and suddenly game on again.
Game on! Time on! Game on! Time on!
Test your missiles with impunity. That's got to be it.
Nice.
I didn't have anything else for that. Throw one in. Throw something in.
Okay, look. First up, I want to say something, and this is to the making it hard for the bots to decipher our voice. It appears that Nighthawk has got a lot of trouble with my accent. So the subtitling software he uses, and I think YouTube's is the same, can't make heads or tails out of what I say. So it's a complete failure. Not only that, though, whenever I speak, apparently his grandchild enjoys the sound, not the content, but the sound of my words. It goes, hurrah! But yeah, so sorry. But yeah, look, it has been a crazy. I want to say one crazy thing before I go into more serious stuff. Do you remember that Kim Jong-un's half-brother met with an untimely Vietnam recently? Malaysia.
At the airport. No way.
In fact, what happened was two women accosted him, potentially three, but definitely two women accosted him and smeared a gel-like substance onto his face, which turns out was a prohibited nerve agent.
Yes.
Which makes you dead very quick. And makes you dead.
That's the undocumented feature of this gel.
And that's scientific speak. That's it. No, she was so the two ladies, two women were arrested for it. There were eight other people, ostensibly North Koreans, that were also fingered, but they got away. They were never arrested. So the North Koreans were make of that. And
like that.
So they were never charged with anything. So but two ladies were charged. One lady was released some time ago, and now after several months, and it's been almost a year, I think now. The last, and this is a Vietnamese girl or lady. She was released without charge on her own reconnaissance, and she's now free to go. It turns out that in Malaysia must have, and this is the commentary from the newscaster, not my commentary, it seems that Malaysia went down the route of preferring to have good diplomatic relations with Indonesia, Vietnam, and North Korea, rather than getting justice for Kim Jong-un's ill-fated half brother who was critical of the regime. So that's on him then, okay? You know. So if you're critical of the North Korean regime, you are on your own, as far as I'm concerned.
Apparently. Yeah, look,
sorry.
I have to say, I'm not. I didn't even read that out. That was Mecky with an M. That's Mecky with an M that read that out.
That's right. Thanks.
So next time you're traveling, Mecky, and there's a lovely lady there that says, "Would you like to try some of this new facial gel?"
Absolutely.
Just make sure you're in. You've got a good angle there on the cameras so we can.
I'll try everything once, and I'll try everything once. That's my grandfather used to say. You can eat every mushroom once.
Once.
Because my grandmother, they used to live in the forest. He was a forester, lived in the forest. This was prior to World War II and all that, whatever. And so they lived in the forest, which was far away from everywhere. And they went mushroom picking quite frequently. He also hunted. Anyway, the point is, my grandmother used to love to go mushroom picking, but she was a city girl. So she would get a basket full of mushrooms. And then my grandfather would sit at the table to sort the ones that would kill you from the ones that could kill you. It's priceless. But a true story.
That's funny because I've known a few people who have come here from the motherland, and they've come here and gone wandering through the bush and found all these mushrooms, and then not only do they have to put it for the ones they recognize into two piles, but then the good pile that is suspected as good, a third party has gone, nah, you can't have that, nah, that. Here's the one mushroom you can have.
Ooh, what a feast!
Just the one. Yeah, but we had a whole basket full.
Well,
all of those will either kill you or you'll go on some personal crusade.
so lucky.
Hope you're not busy for about a month.
The one edible one was 20 pounds. So it'll feed us. It's called 20-pound mushroom. What? No, that's not true. But hey, the thing is this though. I mean, you have to be aware of this, everybody. I know most of us are city folk, and Dave is completely correct here. You cannot just eat them. I mean, if you look at the number of mushrooms out there in existence, all the species and whatnot, the sub phyla and so forth, there's only a handful that you can eat. I so happen to have one of my grandfather's books. In fact, I've got 4 of his books, and one of them is about mushrooms. And it tells you which ones are good to eat and which ones are not. And the drawings are spectacular. They're very detailed. Nice. No, look, yeah, I'm lucky. So that was one of the few things I managed to take from his bookshelf. He had amazing books, but they went to other parts of the family. Anyway, so look, that's the mushroom story. There's a story that the 2 stories, not related, but similar in nature. One is very concerning, and the other is somewhat concerning. And so the one that is very concerning is the Ebola, and you know this, Dave, you posted quite a bit about this. Is the Ebola outbreak in the Congo, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and it just as of the 3rd of May, which was a couple of days ago, the death toll has passed 1,000. So 1,000 people have died of Ebola in the and only once before has an outbreak still been going more than 8 months after it began, and there was the epidemic in West Africa between 2013 and 2016. Which killed 11,500 people. So this is bad. So it's a hemorrhaging fever, essentially. That's what Ebola is, right? It's not good.
You bleed out of everywhere, even things you can't bleed from.
Yeah, that's right. It breaks down the cell membranes, and essentially you liquefy. You bleed. You bleed to death. That's the visible sign. However, apparently, and this is interesting, Ebola outbreak, and this was on the 12th of April, is not yet a global emergency. Now, the Ebola outbreak, which apparently is the second biggest in history. It's the second biggest in history. And that was when the death toll stood at 764. It's still the second biggest, but it's getting bigger, clearly. So in April, it wasn't a global health crisis, but now I don't know. I haven't heard. No one has said it is, but it certainly is a problem, a massive problem. So don't travel to Africa if you can avoid it. Certainly not to the Congo. But it's symptomatic of what we are likely to see going forward as well. And this is the second, and then I will talk about it in a little wider perspective, then I'll throw it back to you, sir. But in measles. So measles are making a big comeback. So again, I had measles when I was a child. I don't remember it as being that bad. But apparently I was very sick when I was a kid. I want to say 7, maybe 8 years old. I was in school, I think. Maybe I was younger. I can't remember. But the point is, I was very, very sick. And Mom said this to me. I don't remember it that way. And it is a disease that can be very, very serious and very dangerous. And it was pretty much eradicated in Europe, in North America, in Australia. But it's making a comeback for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that we're losing our herd immunity. Well, that's a crazy thing, Mickey. What is that? So people always say, oh, I don't want to vaccinate, and MMR is the one vaccine that has the most controversy. If you recall, measles, mumps, rubella, and MMR. So when you bring it together, there seems to be some indications. Some people believe that it could cause autism in some children. Now, I want to say this from the outset. I believe in vaccination for the very simple reason that I've seen it work on myself, on others, and we've seen the decline of certain diseases. But what I must also stress is the fact that, yes, vaccines can have negative side effects. And yes, some people might react badly and die, in fact. And some might react badly and display or become autistic, right? So these are realities. It is no good denying it. But the question here is, which is the lesser of the two evils, right? And I'm not in charge, and I can't make these decisions. But are we vaccinating people, right? Are we gonna go ahead and vaccinate people and increase our herd immunity? Meaning, the more of us are vaccinated, I think it's about above 90 or 96%, the less likely it's for the disease to come about. Because people always say, well, it doesn't matter if I'm not vaccinated. Well, it does matter, because a vaccine is not a surefire thing. Just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean you're not going to get sick. There's a vaccine, and then there's a booster shot, and then people say that if you're an adult now, you should get another booster shot. That's the consensus. But being vaccinated is not 100% guaranteed. It isn't. You can still get sick, right? Probably not as bad, but you can still get sick. And then if you get sick, that means you then can spread the disease as well, and on it goes, right? So whereas if you have a fairly high immunity rate through vaccination in the population, the incidences of that particular disease occurring are less likely. That's what's called herd immunity. It's less likely. Now we are seeing an erosion in the vaccination numbers, especially in North America, in Australia as well, though. Interestingly enough, in Germany, MMR is not administered as a single vaccine. It's administered as 3 different doses: measles, mumps, and rubella, in separate vaccination. So then some of the contention is around having them together. And I'm not saying that people aren't ill-affected by it, but what I'm saying is it could be much, much worse if we did not vaccinate. Right? I'm also not saying that aren't some substances in the vaccines that are fed to the wider population unbeknownst to them, but I can't prove it. I haven't got proof positive that is happening. Okay, so I'm not anti-vaccine, and I'm not explicitly pro-vaccine. But if you ask me to choose between the lesser of two evils, I will go with vaccination. Okay, because I know it works. We've seen it work. We've seen the diseases become eradicated. And if we stop vaccinating, then the disease come back with potentially very dire consequences. So that's one. The second thing is we are now seeing real effects of climate change as well. We're seeing real effects of going into the deepest jungles and knocking down trees and coming into contact with areas and animals and plants that we haven't had contact with for a very, very long time. And thus becoming infected by things like Ebola. I mean, there might be another super virus just waiting for us somewhere. It might be frozen in the tundra. One of the biggest problems immunologists, or generally, I guess, health scientists and doctors are facing at the moment are the bodies that are thawing left over from World War I. So well, I guess
during Spanish flu, Becky.
That's the one. During World War I, what came to be known as Spanish flu, a complete misnomer because it didn't start in Spain. But it doesn't matter. In fact, the belief it started somewhere in Scandinavia. But that's neither here nor there. It's the Spanish flu. Everybody knows it. It killed more people than World War I. Okay. And it was in fact some populations were massively reduced by the Spanish flu. Incredibly so. But the kicker here is that a lot of people that died in World War One died in the permafrost, and their bodies were frozen. Like we're talking Russia and places like that, right? Not just though. And now those graves, if you will, grave sites are thawing, meaning, of course, that the viral material could become active yet again. So that's a huge problem globally, of course, because we don't know what that would mean for us. I mean, if you disturb those bodies, is the virus going to enter the population again? But on top of that, as the permafrost, the tundras are thawing, other tens of thousands of year-old diseases might also resurface yet again. And that is happening. And there's some really interesting news stories around this. And Dave posted when I followed up and looked at the original research. We'll talk about that in a second. But so there are issues here at hand, which are issues right now. And climate change, the warming, the rising of the oceans, the displacement of people, especially the displacement of people, the catastrophic displacement of people, the unsanitary conditions that will arise when the groundwater rises, and the seawater really, but it contaminates the groundwater, it rises, and then it'll wreak havoc with the latrines and but also the sewage systems on coastal towns. So any coastal city, any coastal town, any coastal community will have massive issues as far as sewage is concerned. And anytime there's a flood, anytime there's a tsunami, anything there's an earthquake, the hygienic conditions deteriorate very quickly.
Typhoid and cholera.
Yeah, 100%. And other things that we may not be aware of quite yet. So just to be aware, this is something that it's very difficult to guard against. But, if you hear of an outbreak near you, stay at home. Stay at home. The only way to be safe, well, not even then, but the safest way to not get infected is to stay at home, lock the doors, do what you need. So it's good to have enough food and water in the house to last a couple of weeks, is my opinion.
Yes.
Up to you, but that's what I would do, right? If there were a massive outbreak of something, you just don't leave the house. Don't leave the house if you don't have to. A lot of us, I mean, we are fortunate in the Western world, can work from home. If you had to still work, great, right? Let's do that and get paid or whatever. But don't venture outside. This is my suggestion. Or leave, get ahead of it and leave large population centers. Okay, because they're going to burn themselves out from a viral perspective, because the virus will just go through those populations like wildfire. So Dave, that's a bit more bleak, but certainly timely warning for everybody.
Oh, mine's worse.
Oh, okay then.
It's all good. This isn't a competition, but it's going to get a little lighter anyway. So my two stories are the first one, remembering the fallen. Now, I'm not talking about Anzac Day or those who, lost their lives fighting for freedoms, whatever that is, around the world, wherever you live. But those in probably the best sci-fi, genre that ever existed in the Star Wars world. We lost another one. We lost Peter Mayhew this year. But I just wanted to say that we've lost quite a few. So Uncle Owen, Grand Moff Tarkin, Obi-Wan Kenobi, R2-D2, Princess Leia, and Chewbacca. But there are more, and we've also lost Biggs as well. And it's just those people are Eddie Byrne, Peter Cushing, Alec Guinness, Kenny Baker, Carrie Fisher, and Peter Mayhew. It's sort of, look, for me, it's really sad because I grew up in this new universe, in a universe where we had Star Wars. Lucky the Mandela effect hasn't taken it away from us. The heartfelt nature of the movie, that if you're a good person and you die and you have the Force, then you end up being able to communicate with all those other people that you lost, because it's just the energy, you return back to energy again. Well, they did a little montage or they assembled an image like that with all of those good people in there. And I thought that was really touching. It touched my heart. That was story one. Story two is Apophis is back in the news again. It's crazy. It's if you don't know what Apophis is, it's a meteor named after the Greek god for chaos. And like, I think it made the news again because of the drills that NASA performed this week. The preparedness drills. For what, you might ask? Well, that happens when something huge like Apophis hits the Earth. And what they were trying to do was finding out how prepared NASA was in the event of a large strike. How effectively could they still operate? Now, you'd have to say, who cares? It's NASA. What would NASA care for if it didn't have anyone in space? Oh, yeah, it does. It's meant to have a single person or whatever it is on the International Space Station. But what, no one else? Well, it's not supposed to have had anybody else. But when, if you listen to the people who have broken the story, there's off-worlders, and they've got to keep in touch with us. So it's more likely that whole thing was about keeping the NASA staff safe than anything else. And of course, all the other stories, all the headlines from this story were all about, we're going to, tailgate it, or, shoot rockets at it, or we're going to drag it off path. That's always going to end up in a good way, right?
So just sorry to interrupt, but to be clear, the math here is very clear. Something hurtles at you with whatever velocity it has gathered, in space, where there's no friction. You can put 50 nuclear warheads on it. It'll be like a pop gun, not going anywhere. It'll just keep plowing at you. Okay, sorry. It is.
Yeah, that's right. If it's the size of Mount Everest, you might shatter it into 1,000 pieces, but each one of those pieces will leave a 10-mile wide crater, rather than one massive crater that wipes everybody out pretty much instantaneously. So, look, there's nothing new about meteors hitting the Earth. Tiny ones hit all the time, small ones less. Medium ones around about every 10,000 years or so, big ones every 100,000 years. And then the big ELE meteors hit rarely, like millions of years apart from each other. Now, the last medium one might have been the cluster around the globe at around 10 to 15,000 years ago. And Mekki, you love this, combined with a comet strike, not just a meteor, but a comet strike around about the same time, maybe just before the collision. So there might have been 1,000 years or something between the two. And the first one might have started that mini ice age, and the second one relieved us of the ice age. It is now thought, this week it was released, that the comet was orbiting the sun for about 1 million years before the collision. So like Halley's Comet, right? Similar kind of thing. The comet was there, it was visible, it was documented by tons of the ancient cultures all around the planet. And this week it was announced that the story of the comet strike was recorded in stone reliefs at Göbekli Tepe.
Correct.
Absolutely. Now, it just gets more astounding as time goes on, right? They're finally willing to admit that this culture was there at that time. The culture was there and recorded this. The culture lived through that comet strike, and then slowly, as the 1,000 years of ice age occurred, someone intentionally buried that site. What? I mean,
exactly.
It barely makes sense, right?
No, but it makes perfect sense. I'll tell you why. It makes perfect sense. No, it does. It makes perfect sense.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay, so look, I've just in the chat room, I've just posted the original paper, which is about 18 pages of PDF. It's called Decoding Göbekli Tepe. What archaeoastronomy? With archaeoastronomy, what does the fox say? This is by Martin B. Sweatman and Dimitrios Tsikritsis. Okay, School of Engineering, University of Edinburgh, King's Buildings, Edinburgh, Scotland, UK. So I've given you guys the link. I've downloaded myself, but essentially, this is, I've thought about this for a long, long time. What happens is when you have any stone structure exposed to the elements over thousands of years, it erodes away. That's just what happens. It erodes. It goes away. It becomes just, a featureless nothing. Whereas if you bury it intentionally, whatever you try to convey within your carvings or within your texts or writings on the stone is protected. The same thing happened with the Sphinx. The Sphinx was buried virtually up to its neck, maybe even more, in sand. And it still shows massive levels of erosion. Now, the burying of the Sphinx, there was a natural occurrence, the sand blew on it, and so forth. But it still experienced massive amounts of erosion. If you look at the body of the Sphinx, there are deep channels lining the body of the Sphinx. Now, the same thing would have happened at Göbekli Tepe if it had been exposed to the elements, because it was built thousands of years before there should have been any buildings of any kind, right? So it's a big problem that people have with the Göbekli Tepe. It doesn't fit. And you're right, Dave. What they're saying is that Göbekli Tepe is, in fact, how can I put this best, a repository or a chronicling of this event.
It's like a library.
100%, right? 100%. It's an astronomical chart which talks about the event which happened in the Younger Dryas, which is a time period, an era. Mm-hmm. Okay, about 11,000 years BC. So about 13,000 years ago. That's now, right. Dave and I wanted to bring this. This is one of my stories as well. Dave, of course it is. So we have been saying this for a long time, and Dave has spoken about the impact in the Indian Ocean. We've spoken about the flood myths. We've spoken about what would happen if there was an ice age and there was a meteorite impact that ended that ice age. And all of a sudden, all of the flood stories make perfect sense. Mm-hmm. They make perfect sense because you got a whole bunch of landlocked ice, right? You got massive glacial lakes that are formed within the glaciers, within the ice. The dams are bursting, so there was waters from the deep. The rising comes. There was tsunamis. There was rain. Precipitation. There was a lot of water everywhere. It was a flooding event. It was a massive, major flooding.
And it rained fire too.
Yeah, exactly. Which was, of course, to do with the strike around the Indian Ocean countries. Mm-hmm. So it is astounding. And now, Dave, you're quite right. And thank you very much for finding this, by the way. Hard science, if you will, or archaeoastronomy, which is what these guys are doing, astronomy, geology, and archaeology, I guess, are looking at this. And see, the funny thing is, it actually lines up with everybody else's dates. Mm-hmm. Everybody else's dates. So they're saying about 11,000 BC. The real number here is 10,950 plus or minus 250 years, right? So let's call it 11,000 BC, which is, again, some 13,000 years ago. The Sphinx lines up with that because it was a line, and back then the constellation it was the Sphinx was facing was the constellation of Leo. Whoa, what a shock. Mm-hmm. It lines up with the building of every other side. It lines up with a whole bunch of other dates that were brought forward. It lines up with the end of the last great civilization before
the Tools Down event, Mickey.
The Tools Down event, exactly. We have these massive 1,000-ton, three of them, I think 3 or 4, definitely 3, in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. They're sitting there half finished. One of them is actually 3/4 excavated. We have 3 of them in the platform at the Jupiter Temple in Baalbek. So 3 have been transported there, and I believe that other people afterwards filled stuff in. But I think the original plan, in my opinion, the original plan was to have a larger platform with much more of those larger stones there.
It would have been almost entirely made from those.
Bingo! It never got finished. You have a similar thing with the Easter Island statues. Some were never finished. They're still there, half finished in the quarry. You've got the very interesting case of Puma Punku, a city which, by all accounts, was extremely the way it was built was extremely highly advanced. It had clamps, metal clamps, maybe gold clamps, we believe, that hold together the stones. And in fact, it's the same technique we use today. Exactly the same technique we use today. And it looks like they were thrown about, all the stones in the buildings in Puma Punku. Something
they were scattered like children's toys.
Bingo, right? And we have got these massive boneyards of these animals that back then, in the tundra now, but back then, were eating buttercups in a much more moderate climate. The mammoths, saber-tooth and so forth, giant sloth, all of those wonderful things. So this all of a sudden, all the fringy stuff we've been talking about, which was fringe for a long time, all of a sudden, oh, yeah, hey, maybe there's something to it. now, Dave and I came to this through 40 years of our own researches and putting things together, not being in the field too much. I've been in the field a little bit. I was fortunate to some extent, I guess. So it's just the nature of where I lived and where my family lived. But without being in the field too much, you just look at the puzzle pieces and you look at the work, the hard work that other people have done before you. And I'm not saying they haven't. We're standing on the shoulders of giants here, trying to piece it together, doing.
Mind the pun, by the way.
Well, right. I know, but the truth is that neither Dave nor I are anti-science. We're not Luddites by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, science all day long, and science is absolutely crucial for us to understand the physical world. 100%. You cannot do it without the scientific method. You must have empirical measures. You must do the right thing to understand the physical world. I would never, ever think there's a better way to do it than what we're doing right now. However, the physical world is only one layer of the universe that we inhabit. There are layers beyond that, and this is where usually you lose people and in the discussion or in the conversation, because a lot of people go, that's all mumpets. It's a humbug. None of that is real. There's no such thing as the spiritual. There's no such thing as phenomena beyond the physical. Well, I respectfully disagree. I personally have experienced strange things. Dave has. People I know have experienced strange things. I know for a fact that these things happen and are happening. I can't repeat it because I have no idea what conditions need to be present for them to happen. I just don't know. And I don't think I can take it to the lab and slice it up and weigh it and all those wonderful things that I need to do for a scientific method to work. The scientific method simply doesn't work in this space. It just does not work. And this is, but it's interesting nonetheless. You look at Göbekli Tepe, which is completely unrelatable to anything that the science says we should have. So the scientists said, historians, archaeologists, this is what happened. 5,000 years ago we started, agriculture, blah blah blah, and then in all over the world, it all happened at the same time. Sure, whatever. But Göbekli Tepe, as a structure which shouldn't exist, predates this by thousands and thousands of years. It makes no sense. Yet there it is. And then it was deliberately buried, and this is my point, Dave. It was deliberately buried to protect the information it conveyed. It was deliberately buried to protect the information because I'm sure the people that built it and were there, they realized that, once the catastrophe had occurred or maybe just before, they knew they couldn't survive it. They knew there'd be massive issues. So they didn't want to expose the structure to the elements. And at that point, the exposure would have been more than catastrophic, with all the floods and the rain and whatnot, right? So they buried it in order to preserve the information until such a time when it would be dug up, which happens to be now. But it could have been earlier, could have been later. It happens. I wonder, Dave, how many other sites are there? Because this Göbekli Tepe site, you know how it was found? A farmer was plowing his field and came upon a rock, which he couldn't move because it was too big. So he started digging. And lo and behold, there was a massive stele, like a monolith, that was in the ground. And then he called in the authorities, and they started looking at it, and then from there on, it just kept going. So this was just a dude digging the earth. That's all it was.
The strange thing about the rock is all of the rocks that were holding up a roof of some kind are all T-shaped.
Yes, correct.
And each one of those T's is a person standing with a belt, and their hands, you can see their hands. This is their reliefs, so you can, they've carved into a rock to expose that those images, and also they contain pictures of animals from all around the world as well. So does Pumapunku has people from all around the world in its stone relief.
The ethnotypes. We should say it's the ethnotypes, like the racial features of Africans, of Europeans, of Asians, and even of South American souls. So it's true. Not only there though, other places as well. In fact, the Olmecs. If you look at the Olmecs and the carvings of the heads, they look African for all intents and purposes. Anyway, crazy.
So I want to quickly touch on something else, and it bothers me, and it just continues to bother me. It's not getting any better, and that's Facebook banning Alex Jones, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Louis Farrakhan. Now there's more. Farrakhan, thank you very much. There are more. And the excuse that I keep seeing is that they just contravene the rules by, promoting hate speech or violence or violence. Now, I'm one for free speech. I really am. And I don't care if I don't like what you're talking about. I can turn off. I don't have to listen to it. But when I was looking at theirs, I couldn't see. There's no quoted phrase from them. They're just going, no, let's just ban them. Why don't we just ban them? We should ban them because banning's good, right? We can stop their voices if we do that.
Yeah. Well, there's actually, they've given us reasons. I want to share the reasons with you.
Go on, because I've got a news story for you too.
Okay, perfect. So Facebook explained its rationale for banning the users. So it said Alex Jones had hosted on his program Gavin McInnes, leader of the Proud Boys, whose members are known for racist, anti-Muslim, and misogynist rhetoric. Mr. McInnes has been designated as a hate figure by Facebook. So, sorry, I'm just going to pause there for a second. If Dave and I had interviewed Gavin McInnes, irrespective of whether or not we agree with him, we would now also be banned from Facebook. That's right. I don't have any truck with Mr. McInnes, but in my travels, I could have come across Mr. McInnes at some point. I could have come across a whole bunch of other people as well. All right. In fact, they're saying that David Icke is anti-Semitic or anti-everything, right? Which is also actually not true. Now, Mr. McInnes, I'm sure, is a racist, right? Because I've looked into his profile. He fits the bill for a right-wing hate activist, right? But you can't punish someone that's talking to him. Not really. I mean, if we have freedom of speech, right, which is afforded to Gavin McInnes, then you cannot punish someone for speaking to that person. Facebook further said this year Milo Yiannopoulos, the other guy, had publicly praised both Mr. McInnes and the English Defence League founder Tommy Robinson, both banned from Facebook as well. So you can't say anything positive about these people. Laura Loomer also appeared with Mr. McInnes, and Facebook said she also praised another banned figure, Faith Goldie, a Canadian. And Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan was banned for making several anti-Semitic remarks earlier this year. So it's funny. So if I say something bad about Islam, let's say, for like Mr. McInnes, so anti-Muslim remarks, I'm banned. And if I'm a Muslim, like Mr. Farrakhan, I say something anti-Semitic, I'm banned too. I wonder, and this is gonna get a lot of hate my way. I wonder if I was a prominent Israeli or Jewish leader and I said something anti-Muslim or anti-white, there you go. I say something bad about the WASPs. Would I also get banned on Facebook? I wonder. It is a crazy time we're living in. This is now. It is impossible almost to say anything controversial ever about anything. So the discussion, it has been nicely boxed in, and it was Noam Chomsky, the famed linguist, who said, "You can have any discussion you want, as controversial as you want, as long as it fits within this box."
That's right.
within this box, you can say whatever you like, right? And we now have had the box shrink on us somewhat. So be careful what you say and who you say it to. But see, this is the thing, though. Do I agree that we should keep an eye and maybe even ban things that are actively encouraging hate? The answer is yes. I would say that it's a good thing. It's a good thing not to have this part of the conversation. It's a good thing to stop racial hate speeches. I mean, the problems that are underlying all of these go much deeper than just banning someone from speaking. I mean, you have to ask yourself, well, why is there this racial hate in the first place? Well, again, because we're children. We don't know any better, right? And it has been machined in such a way that our economy, our society, our institutions are all geared towards favoritism. They're geared toward exclusion rather than inclusion. They're geared towards separating us from each other. All of it is geared towards that. And within that, once you start stirring up fear, you can really have a massive impact on the population. So let me put it this way. Most recently, we had a lot of Africans coming to Australia as migrants. It's the latest migrant wave is Africans, right? So, and they're quite dark.
Don't be the music.
Oh.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
There we go. I think I've unmuted it this time. I had a double mute problem this time. Welcome back to Shiny Side Out with David Mickey. This is show number 373. This is the second hour of the show. Apologies for not unmuting. But anyway, I've been talking for at least a minute. You get that. It's one of those things. Now, Mickey was halfway through a thought right before the break, and he's still muted at the moment. What I'm going to suggest is I had two more quick news items before Mickey returns or unmutes, and that is the first one. Did you know that 4 artificial intelligent robots killed 29 scientists in a lab in Japan? Look that up and research to see what you can find on that. And that's extremely interesting. Apparently, 3 of them were dismantled and turned off and disabled. And one of them, which was initially, while they were battling the last one, the first one worked out how to gain itself more strength, or was researching into how can I put myself back together again. They started checking the logs. That's extraordinary. I mean, that's almost Skynet right there, right? That's the day before Skynet kind of event.
I'm sorry, I can't do that, Dave.
You can't do that, Dave. Open a pod bay doors, Hal. Look, in Australia, we're waterlocked, right? We're not landlocked, we're waterlocked. We've had the lucky, fortunate isolation from the rest of the world and have our own very unique species of flora and fauna. One of the things that we made a mistake upon doing, which was we planted sugarcane, and then there was cane beetles, the beetles that grew on the top of the cane, the sugar cane. However, the idea at the time, which they thought was flawless, was to put cane toads in there because the cane toads eat everything, and well, that didn't work because the cane toads can't climb and the beetles can fly. So that didn't work. Anyway, they've been spreading throughout the country from Queensland, and they're almost, I think they're into Western Australia on the top end.
They're here. They're in Sydney.
They are in Sydney because there was a story this week that said that one was found in Ermington.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Not good. Not good. And they're toxic, so you can't touch them and lick your finger afterwards. It's not good.
Yeah, you probably know about them. I think they came from Hawaii. But they're just behind their eyes. They have 2 large glands that if you squeeze them, like a white mucus comes out, and that's extremely toxic. So it's a shame that this unrelenting, advance of these cane toads seems unstoppable. Now, Mackie, where were you? Where were your thoughts, and where were we going?
Look, yeah, sorry. I know I was talking over the music. My apologies. I can't hit the bumper. It's a Skype feature.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was saying is the institutions are existing, and our civilization at large, our society exists to keep us separate, and fear is a big factor in that. The latest migration to hit Australia is from Africa, Somalia more specifically. So the people that are coming across are very dark and quite tall, and very distinct in their ethnic appearance. And so clearly, therefore, distinct from the rest of Australia, and also, therefore, an easy target for fear and hate. And that's exactly what we're seeing. It was the same with every migratory wave that hit Australia. In fact, it's the same anywhere in the world, but Australia seems to be a very nice sample case on what happens and when. After World War II, a whole bunch of Southern Europeans came along, Greeks, Italians, and so forth, Spaniards into Australia. They were made fun of. Then there was a wave of Middle Eastern refugees. Then you had a wave of Asian refugees. In fact, it was a white-only policy that was in effect in Australia until the 70s. Whites only. Yeah, just like South Africa. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. Nobody ever talks about it. Nobody talks about it. Doesn't happen. So Australia, prior to World War I and even after World War II, certainly before World War, it changed after World War II. But prior to World War II, Australia, apart for the Aboriginal contingent and some Asians that had come across with the gold rush, was lily white. All the institutions, every bureaucrat is a lily white society. But each wave of immigrants experienced this backlash. Now, every single wave has been integrated. The latest waves to hit us were from South Asia, Sri Lanka and India specifically. After that, it was Africa. So I expect those two waves to be integrated in the next couple of generations as well. It's just the way it works. But while they're not integrated as much as earlier waves, they're easy fear and hate targets, right? Even in today's day and age, right? There were stories of gangs of African teenagers congregating in Melbourne. But you have to take it with a grain of salt. I was around when there was a race riot in Redfern. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. But there was a race riot in Redfern some years ago, right? What it was is about 10 or 15 teenagers and a couple of cops, getting it on. Nothing. There's no riot gear, none of that stuff. that's pretty much what the race riot was. Near Everleigh Street in Redfern. So it is a little overstated sometimes here in Australia. But the point really is our society encourages division. We say other things, we say the opposite. In reality, it does encourage division because our integration methods are horrible and they just don't work. And now, especially in the States and certainly in large tracts of Europe, this separation is now actively pursued. I mean, you can say what you want, and I'm not saying it's the right thing or wrong thing, but Donald Trump is closing off the states. He's changing immigration policy. He's making it harder. He wants to build a wall, all that wonderful stuff. He wants to get all the illegal immigrants out of the country. Never mind that the economy would collapse if he did. But there's a very real fear that is being fostered of the unknown, of the other, of the perceived threat to whatever it is that you are. Right? If you're white, if you're black, or if you're Asian, someone is threatening your way of life. Someone is threatening who you are. One of the most homogenous societies, Japan, is relaxing its immigration policy. You know why? Because they're running out of people. They're running out of people. And that's what happens, okay? There are just simply not enough people born to fill all the jobs that will be needed, in the next 20, 30, 40 years. So that's my point, Dave. We're living in a society that's suffering from massive schizophrenia. In fact, not even multiple personality disorder, right? Not just schizophrenia, but multiple. So we're saying one thing, but we're doing another thing, but we really mean it's a third thing. And it's just not working. What I learned this week, in fact, today I learned something new, Dave. And then we're going to go into the Giants, but I want to share this with you very quickly.
What is it?
And I was driving along, listening to the radio, and they were talking about New Zealand and gun control, right? And they're acting very quickly on it after the shooting in the 2 mosques, a little while ago. Mm-hmm. And the reason they could do that is because they have a very different parliamentary system to most everybody else. They're not following the Westminster system. The Westminster system went out the window some years ago, and what they have instead. I won't repeat the name because it's too long. Essentially, it's representative democracy. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we have, Mackie. Well, no, we don't. In Australia, we have a preferential system. In the States, you've got a college system. So it's all about the size of the state and the size of the colleges. The actual vote of the people is, secondary at best. Same in Australia. Because we've got, it's very complicated. But the point is, it's not the people's vote that matters in the end. Not really, right? It's preferential selections. But what they do is, in the popular vote, Dave, if your party gets 5% of the popular vote, you get 5% of the seats in parliament. Wow. If you get 20% of the popular vote, you get 20% of the seats in parliament. So out goes the 2-party system, and it's much more closely related to what you have in Germany or even in Israel, right? Like it's a true multi-party, multi-representative democracy, where the popular vote directly reflects your power within Parliament. Very interesting, I think. So that's all I wanted to share. So I'm just saying there is another way. It doesn't have to be a 2-party or even a college system, per se. Oh, now, which brings us to the giants under the earth. Now, this is fascinating. Now, before I go into this, and I'll give the recap to Dave. If you cast your mind back to the, I can't remember, Enuma Elish, I think it was, so the Tsuharas, the epic that we shared with you around the Igigi. In the original story of the Igigi, the cuneiform tablet, I think it's the Tsuharas, they talked about how they took one of the Igigi, and I'm paraphrasing here, chopped him up, and then used his body to create the human race. That's what they said, right? And now the Igigi have become synonymous with the giants of old, the watchers, the sons of God that went to the women of the earth and had their children with them. So so they did use the body to make the Adamu, our ancestor race, if you will, the Adamu. And a lot of, and you will see this when I read this to you, a lot of the mythologies talk about the giants' bodies being used to create the earth or form the earth. And in the Bible, it says that Eve was created from the rib of Adam. Now these are all, I guess these are all memories of the original story of how one of the Igigi was killed to create the Adamu. And I will explain what I mean. As you tell a story over time, it just gets lost, right? The meaning gets lost in translation. The people want to maybe put their own agenda spin on it. Like certainly within the Bible, well, clearly we want to make men dominant. It's a patriarchy, right? So man is dominant. Therefore, woman was created second and out of the rib of Adam. Now, this is only half true because men and women were created at the same time, according to the Anunnaki tablets, right? They were created at the same time. But it's created out of the body of someone else, or at least there was genetic material used for someone else. So there's like an echo of a memory. And similarly, other mythologies talk about the giants being killed and then out of their bodies the earth being formed. Well, again, this is an echo of a memory that, yes, they did use the genetic material of giants, of the Igigi, if you will, to create the Adamu, the human race that came before us. Not only that, every culture talks about the giants being the offspring of earth-born women. Mm-hmm. Every single one. It's always an earth mother and someone else, like the god or spacefarer or whatever. But always an earth mother, Gaia or whatever they're called in every mythology. So these are the themes that are running through the mythologies. These are the themes. And it is a memory of what happened. We're talking about ancestral and genetic memory to some extent. I mean, these mythologies were passed down over thousands of years. Yeah, if something survives that long, there's something to it. The specifics, the detail, you can only preserve if you protect it, like the burying of the temple not the temple, like the burying of the site of Göbekli Tepe. They buried it so the information wouldn't get lost. There's a massive chamber underneath the Sphinx. It's there. We know it's there because they did the echo sounding, It is there. And they were meant to go in it 15, 20 years ago. I heard about it for the first time. I haven't heard a single peep since. Not a peep. Some people believe there's a massive library under the Sphinx. Again, with the obvious task of preserving knowledge, probably pre-flood knowledge. They have found libraries, in the Americas underground. They are anecdotal stories, right? They're books with gold pages. In fact, John Smith was given
a book I know
with
that one.
Pages, right? This is the origin story of the Mormons. He took the book or the books with the golden pages and copied it onto paper, and then it was taken away again by the angel, or by whom he called the angel, that had given to him in the first place. So there are other stories of these underground libraries of pages or books rather that had pages made out of gold. Now that sounds very odd. You'd say, well, not really, because what lasts? So paper doesn't last. Forget about that, right? Paper is not going to last at all. In fact, even if you do nothing to it, if you just put it into a drawer, come back in 1,000 years, and you touch it, it'll turn to dust. That's what happens to paper. Yeah, it's a thing. Plastic, it will decay quite a bit over time. Okay, believe it or not. Gold, nothing will happen to gold. Zero. Silver, similar. Silver will tarnish, so you'd have to polish it quite a bit to get to the look of it. But gold doesn't tarnish. Platinum doesn't tarnish. So it makes perfect sense.
It doesn't oxidize, and it's always gold.
It is always gold. So if you wanted to, if you had really important information, or maybe a religious text that is really important from a philosophical or whatever point of view, and you want it to last, it is sensible to have pages or have the information printed or stamped or whatever you do into pages of gold. That makes perfect sense. It'll last forever.
It's also the reason why Carl Sagan and the Planetary Science Society put together the gold record on the spacecraft and sent it off to another planet.
So just for everybody who might not be aware of this, back in the 70s, Carl Sagan and a whole bunch of people at NASA got together and thought, hey, it's a good idea to tell everybody where we live and who we are. So they got together and, as Dave has said, created this gold record with a picture of a man and a woman and a whole bunch of other stuff, mathematical formula and so forth, encoding our location in the solar system and encoding who we are for other alien races to see, I guess, at some point in the future when they find it. And you're right, Dave, and they did it on gold because gold doesn't freaking tarnish. It doesn't rust, doesn't do anything, right? I mean, if you melt it down, that's a different story, right? If you bombard it with radioactive isotopes, it can change too, sure enough. But gold in and of itself is a fantastic storage medium, which is why we're still using gold in our computers, mostly for conductive purposes. But okay, so let's roll back for a second here, right? So what lasts? So gold lasts and stone lasts. If you chisel something in granite, it'll be there for a while. If you bury it in sand, it'll be there for a little while longer. So it makes perfect sense that everything that we have of anything really, right? Any worthwhile information that we have left to us, it comes either in some kind of stone format or a precious metal. Okay, the only few exceptions to that rule were the Qumran rolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now these were parchment made out of papyrus. Papyrus is actually a plant. It's a river plant. You see it. It's a reed. Okay, and the Egyptians perfected the art of making paper out of it. So, but that lasted in those clay urns. It was sealed, by the way. Think of it as a large vase that is sealed, and because of the dry and warm conditions that prevailed in the desert where they were hidden back in the day, like 2,500 years ago, they survived. They survived because of the conditions. Now, these conditions will not be there over the course of, say, 50,000 years, but over 2,000 or 3,000 years, the climate is stable. These things can survive. Now, it's just dumb luck that we found it. Again, it was a guy. It was a farmer who found them and used a whole bunch of the stuff that he found for, go on,
kindling. That's right.
Until he thought, hey, maybe I can sell some of this crazy stuff to someone. Okay, so we don't know. I mean, okay, so my point here is that these crazy dumb luck finds that we make are exactly that. They're crazy dumb luck finds. There's so much more information out there that is either not found yet or has been destroyed. It boggles the mind, and we should thank whoever your specific deity is on your knees for having found what we have found. And the same goes for the stone. What's the stone? The three languages that allowed us to translate the hieroglyphs. I can't think of it now. The Rosetta Stone. The
Rosetta Stone. That's right? One.
That was just a godsend, you know. And I'm not using this necessarily in the religious context, but it was a serious find. But we need to understand that all of these things, right? All of this information is only sensibly maintained if you protect it. And the best protection is a precious metal, right? Or potentially in stone. I mean, if you've got a more durable storage medium, great. All these hard drives and flash drives that we have, the optical drives, they're going to rust away. Give it 6,000-7,000 years, there won't be anything left of it. Okay, it's completely. In fact, if there's a strong magnetic field change or anything like that, all our storage media are completely screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're magnetic in nature. Or if they're not magnetic in nature, then the massive magnetic or electromagnetic bursts can seriously disrupt their function. It's just the way we work. It's just what we did, right? Our stuff is not meant for the ages. They said, oh, CDs, they will last forever, Dave. No.
No. In fact, I've got CDs where it appears like there's some kind of oxidization occurring beneath the two plastic surfaces.
Yes, because they were manufactured. Go on.
Yeah. No, it looks like it's eating it away. It looks like insect tracks or something inside there. Yeah. Crazy.
And buddy. If you could produce these things in a completely clean environment with zero humidity, I mean zero.
Yep.
Then yes, okay, that could last for a long, long time. You lock it away, you keep it away from strong radiation, and yeah, that's a thing that can last for you. But the way it was manufactured, this is mass manufacture here. They didn't have these clean rooms for every CD they made. In fact, they had none of it for once it became like a mass product. Nah, not at all. And similarly for other things. In fact, your records will last a lot longer than the CDs. So just as a thing. So now let me share the giants under the earth with that preamble.
That's some preamble.
That was entirely necessary. Some myths use giants to explain features of the natural world. For example, during the struggle in which the Greek gods overcame the giants, several fallen giants became part of the landscape. As the giant Enceladus ran from the battlefield, the goddess Athena smashed him with the island of Sicily. Imagine that. Thereafter, he lay imprisoned under the island, breathing his fiery breath out through the volcano called Etna. Under Vesuvius, a volcano on the Italian mainland, lay another giant, Mimas. Hephaestus, the god of metalsmith, buried him there under a heap of molten metal. The giant who had to die so that the earth could be formed from his body, the giant Pangu, fills a similar role in Chinese mythology. Aboriginal people in northwestern Australia have stories about the two Bagajimbiri brothers, both giants and creator gods who made the landscape and people. When they died, their bodies became water snakes and their spirits became clouds. According to the Akamba people of Kenya, a giant hunter named Mkwa created the mountains and rivers. Myths from many parts of the world say that in some remote time, human ancestors were giants and that they have shrunk down to the present size over a long period. Other stories tell of giants living among people at an earlier time in history. Gog and Magog are two giants in British myth. We spoke about those. I love that story, by the way. Brutus, the legendary founder of Britain, is said to have conquered them. Well, the two giants, that is. In Jewish myth, a race of giants lived in the world along with people of the great flood that wiped out most living things. One giant, Og, survived the flood by hitching a ride on Noah's Ark, and we spoke about that as well. Later, however, he came into conflict with Noah's descendants, and the prophet Moses had to kill him. Dave?
Look, there's so much cross this information, and when you hear one, I like when you hear one story and it pulls in some other stories. And was Og mentioned in the Noah's Ark tale itself? I wonder. Okay, so this is part of a recap here. This is giants from the Bible. The Anakites, who come from the Nephilim, Numbers 13:28 through 33, the Emites, the Deuteronomy 2 to 10, or page 10, sorry, and the Raphaites, Joshua 12:4, were giants living in the promised land. The Bible also records the famous strife between David and the giant Goliath, ending with the defeat of the latter. Goliath was 6 cubits and a span in height, over 9 feet tall. 1 Samuel 17:4 KJV. Biblical city where David battled Goliath found, ? And here's the story. National Geographic from November 21st, 2008. The remains of an ancient gate has pinpointed the location of the biblical city of Shar Arayim, say archaeologists working in Israel. In the Bible, young King David is described as battling Goliath in the city before eventually killing him in the Elah Valley. Also, Gog and Magog are usually considered to be giants and are also found in the folklore of Britain. Goodness me. We've got a picture of the Sumerian gods who, I swear, we stand up to their just above their knee. Goodness me, in comparison, I know, height.
Right? I love that. I love that picture.
Yeah, this is one of the cylinder seals.
Yes,
depicting the that you can roll out onto fresh clay now, like a press that would create newsprint, and then you can fire it, and you've got the same story that was there originally. Isn't it amazing? Continue with giants in Hindu mythology, Mickey.
Okay. In Hinduism, the giants are called Daityas. They were a race who fought against the gods because they were jealous of their Deva half-brothers. Some Daityas from Hindu mythology include Kumbhakarna and Hiranyaksha. And we find that as well. So before I go on, sorry. 2 things. One, I agree with not Lord Odin, the Stardust Man. Lord Odin. No, Stardust Man. The crystal skulls. I believe there's more to the crystal skulls than we know, and because there's a lot of information that seems to come out of them when people concentrate and look into them. There's some stories around that. We will look into this in some more detail. I don't have a fully formed opinion yet. Having said that here, the giants and the gods are related in every single mythology as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They're always related. Okay, and not only that, there's a race of elder gods always. Elder to both the giants and the gods. Yes. Okay, so again, it's the same thing. This again, in any pantheon, in any religion, in any peoples around the world, you can argue that people would do the same thing. So when you talk about pyramid builders, you say, there are a lot of pyramids around the world. But scientists can explain it away by saying, well, it's the most efficient form to build high. It is. It is the most efficient form that is structurally sound, that can attain a great height, because you start with a large base and you go smaller to the top. That is structurally sound engineering. And if you haven't got any advanced materials, it's easier to get to height with a pyramid. So you could say, well, these pyramids are everywhere because that's how people got to a certain height of building. Fair enough. Fair enough. You know, and you can make other arguments around other things as well. But when you've got when you've virtually got the same kind of basic ingredients to the mythology across the world in cultures that, well, weren't really that connected. I'm not saying they were unconnected, but they weren't that connected. And they share all the same family relations with each other, right? So there was a race of elder gods, then there was a race of gods, which defeated the elder gods, and there was a race of giants too, which also fought with the gods. And not only that, those giants then were used to form the land or form the people or form something or other, right? And these are all snippets. And you can, when you go back to which I believe is one of the primary sources, which is the Sumerian texts, okay, because they're as far back as we can push at this point. I'm sure we could push back further, but at this point, that's how far we can push as far as the written record is concerned. When you look at the primary stories, and you look at the detail, the rich detail, and the actual story itself, how self-contained and coherent and logical it is, yeah, you have to go, wow. And then you look at all the other stories, all the other mythologies, and you can see how they all have taken parts of that original story and remembered them differently. You know, so some memories were transmitted in one way, other memories were transmitted in another way, but they all have the same core message. And again, if you look at the original, which I believe is one, you know, very close, or at least as close to the original as possible, when you look at that, and again, it's the richness of the story. It's the complete self-containment and internal logic of the story, which is compelling to me, because I like to write and read myself, but you read and write, so you read the story and you think, well, this is really well written. This is a very compelling, very convincing story that is being told here by someone that doesn't fully understand the science, but this person clearly either was told something in great detail or saw something in great detail, right? And it is this context of the content that is transmitted throughout virtually every mythology on the planet, which to me says one clear thing, right, amongst others, that there was a super civilization at some point that was connected globally, like we are today, but more so than today, okay? And I believe it's because we all spoke the same language, which again, I believe was in fact telepathy, which again, it was all changed after the Great Fall, and the race of the Adamu was wiped out. Now, let's get to giants in Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, the gigantes or gigantes were, according to the poet Hesiod, the children of Uranus and Gaia, which is the elder gods and the earth. There's a shock, right? Again, the elder gods, Uranus and the earth. Earth women. They were involved in a conflict with the Olympian gods, called the Gigantomachy. That's what the conflict was called, which was eventually settled when the hero Heracles, or Hercules, decided to help the Olympians. The Greeks believed some of them, like Enceladus, to lay buried from that time under the earth, and that their tormented quivers resulted in earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Greek mythology also features the Cyclops, well remembered for their encounter with Odysseus in Homer's Odyssey. Giants, though not gigantes, with only one eye. The Titans were as well often imagined to be of great size and strength, hence the word titanic. So the giants are different from the Titans, okay? Herodotus in Book 1, Chapter 68, describes how the Spartans uncovered in Tige, which is a place, the body of Orestes, which was 7 cubits long, around 10 feet. In his book, The Comparison of Romulus with Theseus, Plutarch describes how the Athenians uncovered the body of Theseus, which was of more than ordinary size. The kneecaps of Ajax were exactly the size of a discus for the boy's pentathlon, wrote Pausanias. He was a Spartan. A boy's discus was about 12 centimeters in diameter, while a Norman adult patella, which is a kneecap, is around 5 centimeters, suggesting that Ajax may have been around 14 feet tall. So I'll chuck it to you, Dave, but just to reiterate, the names such as like Ajax, Theseus, Heracles, these are all heroes of old. The same heroes, I wager, that the Bible mentions when it talks about, oh, there were giants in those days, men of renown, right? The offspring of the women of the earth and the sons of God. Dave.
Good on you. That's funny. I wish my Norse was better. This is giants in Norse mythology. In Germanic mythologies, of which Norse mythology, due to its extensive Icelandic sources, is the only one well recorded. The giants, or Jotnar in Old Norse, a cognate with Etin, are often opposed to the gods. They come in different classes, such as frost giants. Can you say the ones in brackets for me, Mickey?
Sure can. Frost giants. That's Hrumposa.
Thank you. Fire giants.
Eldjotnar.
And mountain giants.
Bergrisar.
The giants are the origin of most of the monsters in Norse mythology, e.g. the
Fenris Ulfur.
You did such a good job with this. And in the eventual apocalyptic battle of Ragnarok, the giants will storm Asgard, the home of the gods in heaven, and defeat them in war, thus bringing about the end of the world. Even so, the gods themselves related to the giants by many marriages. And there are giants such as Aegir, Mimir, and Skyori, who bear little difference in status to them. Norse mythology also holds that the entire world of men was once created from the flesh of Ymir, a giant of cosmic proportions, by some considered to share a root with the name Yama of Indo-Iranian mythology. The Bergrisi appear as a supporter on the coat of arms of Iceland.
Again, it's fascinating that you have the Ymir. Again, it's the giant, and out of this giant, out of his flesh, the world was built. Now, again, this is if someone told you the story of the original of the Anunnaki, the Sumerians there, and they remembered, there was a giant, Igigi was killed, and then all the people came from him, so the world was built from him. That's what you remember. And if you only hear it once, maybe, right, or a couple of times, that's what you tell your people then. Oh yeah, there was this guy, giant Ymir, his name was, which is again, if you Igigi, Ymir, Yama, okay, I'm not saying, but I'm saying, and all of a sudden, and in fact, gigantes, Igigi, the Greek word is gigantes. That's the Greek word, gigantes, Igigi. You've got two very plosive consonants there, right? Good, right?
That's right.
It's linguistically significant, in my opinion. So, and there's this again, the same basis, it seems, that formed the mythology of these things. Anyway, well, what about the giants in other European languages, legends rather?
In folklore from all over Europe, giants were believed to have built the remains of previous civilizations. I don't think the giants built the remains. I think they built what
remains of it, right?
And now remains.
Yeah, that's
right. Saxo Grammaticus, for example, argues that giants had to exist because nothing else would explain the large walls, stone monuments, and statues that we know were the remains of Roman construction. Similarly, the Old English poem Seafarer speaks of the high stone walls that were the work of giants. Even natural geologic features, such as the massive basalt columns of the Giant's Causeway on the coast of Northern Ireland, were attributed to construction by giants. Giants provided the least complicated explanation for such artifacts. The only one I don't agree with is the Giant's Causeway. Because that crystalline structure of the basalt causes that shape, and we see that in all the places where there were, millions of years ago, a volcano. In Basque mythology, giants appear as Gentilak and Mar Iruk, or Moors, and were said to have raised the dolmens and menhirs. After Christianization, they were driven away, and the only remaining one is Olentzero, a coal maker that brings gifts on Christmas Eve. Wow.
I know, right?
Yeah, right. Because we did a show about Christmas. That's extraordinary. Tales of combat with giants were a common feature in the folklore of Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. Some Irish giants, such as Fionn, Mac, Cumhale, Finn McCool, or as it might be known, were considered benevolent and well-liked by humans. Celtic giants also figure in Breton and Arthurian romances. And from this source, they spread into the heroic tales of Torquato Tasso or Ludovico Aristo and their follower Edmund Spenser. In the small Scottish village of Kinloch, Rannoch.
I love that.
A local myth to this effect concerns a local hill that apparently resembles the head, shoulders, and torso of a man, and has therefore been termed the sleeping giant. Apparently, the giant will awaken only if a specific musical instrument is played near the hill. I'm going to guess it isn't bagpipes. That's because that would have already awoken the giant.
That would have happened.
If nothing else, the giant would have squashed the bagpipe player. Sorry, that's a joke. You may love bagpipes, and I've got some friends who are Scottish, and they certainly, it brings a tear to their eye when they hear it. Many giants in British folklore were noted for their stupidity. A giant who had quarrelled with the mayor of Shrewsbury went to bury the city with dirt. However, he met with a shoemaker carrying shoes to repair. The shoemaker convinced the giant that he had worn out all of the shoes coming from Shrewsbury, and so it was too far to travel. Other British giants were told in stories of how they threw stones at each other. This was used to explain many great stones on the landscape. That's still possible. Giants figure in many great fairy tales and folklore stories, such as Jack and the Beanstalk. I'd forgotten all about that one. The giant who had no heart in his body, the Nix Nout Nothing, Robin Hood and the Prince of Aragon, the young Ronalds and Paul Bunyan. Ogres and trolls are humanoid creatures, sometimes of gigantic stature, that occur in various sorts of European folklore. An example of another folklore giant is, what's this? Rubizal.
Yes.
A kind giant in German folklore who lived in the giant mountains, nowadays the Czech-Polish border.
So I actually grew up with stories of Rubizal. I still have a book of his. Yeah, he's called Rubizal, which means to count carrots or to count beets. Right? That's what Rubizal actually means. Because there was a princess he loved, and the princess came to see. He stole her, I guess. And she said, if you count all the beets in the field, I will marry you. And so off he went to count all the beets in the field, and she took that time to make her escape. So he wasn't the brightest, but he was quite a like they say, kind giant. He was also called the ghost under the mountain. He's the original giant under the mountain. And the mountains, the giant mountains, they're actually called Riesengebirge. The mountains are actually called the giant mountains, as a reference to a giant. Right? So they're named after a giant. They're not called gigantic mountains, they're called the mountain of the giant, if you will. So I grew up with that particular tale, and he was also punishing wrongdoers for the most part, right? He had quite a kingdom under the mountain. So he was what Tolkien called in his stories the king under the mountain. That's Rubizal. So look, again, I grew up in Germany with a whole bunch of these fairy tales, and to me they just form part of my upbringing, so I take them relatively seriously. because I think there's a lot more to it than we give credence to. Which brings us to giants in the West, my friend, and this is where it gets interesting, Dave. It gets interesting because we've discussed this at length before, and we can probably not share. Oh, we might be able to. We've discussed this before. We in the 19th century, specifically in the years between 18 and the 1900s, right? A lot of archaeological finds were made, even in the early 20th century, up to like the 1940s. A lot of things were unearthed, and people just found them and reported them. You know, like really crazy things, anomalous things. In strata they shouldn't exist, giant skeletons, but that has completely died down. And there's now a rumor, a conspiracy, if you will, that the Smithsonian and other, museums, official institutions have put a lid on it to keep us from seeing or knowing that this may in fact be a fact. So aside from the mythology and folklore, mysterious remains of giants have been found in America. Giants are usually human-like remains that are 7.5 feet or more in height, which is pretty tall. And we established that 8 feet is probably the current limit for us that is sensible, it seems. The book Forbidden Land by Robert Lyman, which was published in 1971, recounts the following finds. Again, Forbidden Land by Robert Lyman, Lyman, published in 1971. A decayed human skeleton claimed by eyewitness to measure around 3.28 meters, which is 10 feet 9 inches, was unearthed by laborers whilst plowing a vineyard in November of 1856 in East Wheeling, which is in West Virginia. And we will find this here a lot. So all these archaeological finds, still to this day, including Göbekli Tepe, are made by complete lay people, not by people looking for it, not by the archaeologists, right? But by complete lay persons. And I think that's probably the safest way to actually hear about it, Dave. If it's found by a lay person, they have no best interest not to tell anyone. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Ooh, crazy conspiracy.
Because you're not an expert. You don't know what you're looking at.
There you go, right? A human skeleton measuring 3.6 meters, about 12 feet tall, was unearthed at Lompoc Rancho, California in 1833 by soldiers digging in a pit for a powder magazine. The specimen had a double row of teeth and was surrounded by numerous stone axes, carved shells, and porphyry blocks with abstruse symbols, or abstract, associated with it. Several mummified remains of red-haired humans ranging from 2 to 2.5 meters, which is 6.5 to over 8 feet tall, were dug up at Lovelock Cave, 70 miles northeast of Reno in Nevada, by a guano mining operation. Yeah. These bones substantiated legends by the local Paiute Indians regarding giants, which they called Citekars. We mentioned that earlier. For some reason, scientists did not seem to want to investigate these finds further, so many of the bones were lost. What a shock. Fortunately, one of the giant Lovelock skulls is still preserved today. It measures almost 30 centimeters, which is 1 foot tall, and resides along with other various Lovelock artifacts, in the Humboldt Museum in Winnemucca in Nevada. Some of these artifacts can also be found in the Nevada State Historical Society's museum at Reno, which I will make a pilgrimage to. A 9-foot 11-inch skeleton was unearthed in 1928 by a farmer digging a pit to bury trash in Kansas Parish, Louisiana, near Waterproof. In 1931, a 10-foot 2-inch skeleton was unearthed by burying his dog in 1933 in nearby Madison Parish. Dave?
By a boy. That's right. By a boy burying his dog. Aside from the Forbidden Land, we can find other unverified examples or legends about the remains of giants. A 9-foot-8 skeleton was excavated from a mound near Brewersville, Indiana. Indianapolis News, November 10th, 1975. In Clearwater, Minnesota, the skeletons of 7 giants were found in mounds. These had receding foreheads and complete double dentition. That's the same thing. This is Childress, 1992, page 468. I wonder if that's David Childress.
It is.
A mound near Toledo, Ohio, held 20 skeletons seated and facing east with jaws and teeth twice as large as those of present-day people. And besides each was a large bowl with curiously wrought hieroglyphic figures. That was the Chicago Record, October 24th, 1895, cited by Ron J. Dobbins, NERA Journal of Volume 13 in the fall of 1978. In the city of Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada, there is a span of mountains 5 miles long that are in the shape of a man wearing a headdress, laying down on his back, and is called the Sleeping Giant. It is from local Obdway legend that identifies the giant as Nano Biju, the spirit of deep sea water, who was turned to stone when the secret location of a rich silver mine, now known as Silver Islet, was disclosed to white men. And finally, the Patagons of Patagonia in South America, giants claimed to have been seen by Ferdinand Magellan and his crew.
And others. So
and others, that's true. That's right.
There was a whole raft, and we this is just a recap. So we spoke about this, but there's a whole raft of explorers that have claimed to have seen them. Until in recent times, they said, that's not true. That never happened. There's nothing to see here. Move along. And look, that's as far as we can go with you today, I think, because we only have a few minutes. And the next bit is hard science. We intersperse it to make it, I guess, a bit more interesting that way. But the next bit of hard science is around height. Human height and genetic mutations, dwarfism, gigantism, and so forth. It's interesting to understand how it all works within us. And after that, there's also, we're going to talk about average height, and we're going to talk about somewhat mythical giants from around the world to liven it up a bit after the hard science bit. But look, the key thing I'd like everybody to take away from this, as always, I guess, please understand that you cannot look at any phenomenon in isolation. Any mystery, anything that seems to you out of the ordinary, I guarantee you there's a raft of other things connected to it. Okay, nothing exists in isolation. Everything is connected. And the more, and look, Dave and I have spent the last 8 years looking at this, maybe much more so than we did in the previous 30 years, because we had the time and the excuse, I guess, because we're on the air with Revolution Radio here and Nighthawk, and he's given us generously this platform upon which we from which we pontificate to you. Mm-hmm. And it's fun, right? But it gave us the opportunity to have an excuse to do more research. And the last 8 years, I'll be honest with you, they have really cemented in for me the fact that everything is not quite as we were taught in school. And I think Goethe said there's more between heaven and earth than we were ever told in school. And I think that's very true. In fact, I will go as far as saying that everything, or most of the things we do learn in school are good for everyday living. Like they make you useful as far as a member of society is concerned, but they're not very useful to us when it comes to exploring the deeper and greater mysteries, the things that actually matter to our existence. So yes, we can live in this life, and it's all good. Don't get me wrong; it's a good life for hopefully for most of you out there in listener land. But the fundamental mysteries of life, the fundamental mysteries of existence, and what happens before and after this life that we experience. Because all we have is the moment. We only experience the present moment. We can't go back to the past, it seems, and we don't know what the future holds. So all we have is the moment. But what lies beyond those boundaries, these perceptive boundaries, these limitations that we seem to have built into us, into our very psyche, into our very biology, these limitations that express themselves in forward-facing creatures, bipedal, 2 arms. Why? Why are we thus? Why are we not more like an octopus with 9 brains, no less? 1 primary brain and 1 brain in each of its tentacles. And arguably, potentially more intelligent than we are. Similarly, dolphins and whales quite possibly more intelligent by our measure than we are. But our mystery is very specific. Our mystery is very compelling, because we are self-aware and we can ask these questions, and we should ask these questions, and we should never stop asking these questions, because there are no good answers yet. There are no good answers. It is no good. Oh yeah, these experts, they know. They don't know. These experts don't know. There was a guy. Socrates. That's it. Socrates. Philosopher. And the Delphi of Oracle said he's the smartest guy around at the time. And the reason he was the smartest guy around at the time is because he said openly and publicly, I know full well that I know nothing. I know full well that I know nothing. And I feel the same way. Yes, we talk a lot about these things. We have a lot of knowledge per se. We have little wisdom, and we have no answers. We can talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but there are no answers, guys. We can't give you the final answer. We can give you some indications. We can tell you, well, I think maybe it's this. And the hypothesis does this for you, right? If you get the chance, listen to any like a show number 100, 200, or 300 or whatever, and follow the cycle from there, and you will hear about the hypothesis. Trying to like it's like the great unifying theory of everything, right? Not in physics terms, but certainly in philosophical and historical terms. So it is fascinating, and I don't understand why people waste their time doing things like reality TV. I don't understand it. There's so many other things that you could occupy yourself with. It's fascinating stuff out there, right, Dave? And don't forget to donate, because it is just a fun radio.
That it certainly is. Look, that comes to the end of show 373. Stay tuned for a roundtable with Jer Bear, and we'll see you next week. Take care, and don't paste any hate into Facebook. See y'all.